So we were gonna kind of start up where we were off last time. We talked about two communities. Russ spoke about St. John's. I really focused on Bowie and what's happening down in our region. And so we kind of wanted to do just a little bit of a recap of where we were in those communities and how we've moved forward. Unfortunately, haven't been able to do much in Bowie. We did get them up onto a new water system, so that's pretty good. They have consistent water in that area. And we'll just be working on some capacity building. But Russ has had some great success in St. John's. So I'm going to turn it over to him for him to give you an update on where they are.
Thanks, Mignonne, and thanks everyone for being here. Yeah, so last time, we talked a lot about the challenges, right, that our rural communities face. They're not the urban centers, they're different. And so in St. John's, a couple different things, and I'll share a short video with you to give you a little flavor if you haven't been to St. John's in a second. Everything from broadband, and we'll talk about these topics a little bit more, trying to get a customized solution. So we've formed a public-private partnership with a nonprofit, certainly housing, but the big focus for St. John's has really been in their tech park. And as we're trying to respond to where we're losing the jobs from the coal-fired power plants, how we respond to that. So I'm going to share a short video of St. John's in case you haven't been there yet. And these videos were put together by the high school students.
Why did you choose St. John's to raise your family?
I just felt like the sense of community, just like the calming family community after John died, is what I wanted to take into. And I wanted them to grow up in that same loving community that I did.
People here are remarkable.
Well, I was born and raised here. I really liked it growing up, the school system, basic small town atmosphere. It's just a nice place to be.
It's easy to live here. We don't have, per se, the issues that a big city life offers, or has, I should say, offers. I served 2 years in New York on a mission, saw some city life, talked to my brother about living in the valley, city life. I have friends that live there, and the challenges that come with that, the crime rates, the drug problems, the ability to have your children get into things that they shouldn't, that's just readily right there available at their fingertips. We don't seem to have that up here. Our crime rate's low, our drug problems are low. We know everybody in town, and everybody in town gets to help raise our kids.
I just like the small community that we have here and all the people. You know everybody, so if your kids get in trouble, they can tell you.
It's a real tight-knit community. Like she said, everybody knows everybody. And it's easy to get along with everybody here. There's no violence, per se, as if we were in the city. There's no gangs, stuff like that. The schooling here is awesome.
What do you like most about St. John's?
I like the small town. I grew up in a small town. I like that the kids have the freedom of a small town.
It was one of my favorite areas to be in as a missionary, and why not a great place to raise a family.
I came to this town and knew no one. It was my husband. And I had kids from another marriage, and everyone just took us in.
I think it's like he said, the schools too.
I think that's a big thing is the schools.
The biggest thing, yeah, the schools.
The classrooms aren't very big, so teachers are allowed to be able to do more one-on-one.
Yeah.
Versus having, you got these 6-day schools that, I don't know how many kids they carry in a classroom.
All the teachers they've had have given them one-on-one.
Sure.
Anything and everything they've needed.
They say that it takes a village, and we have the very best village.
So that's a little bit of a video and visual of St. John's. So I'll turn it back over to Mignonne, and we can jump into other updates and topics.
All right, so we've got some exciting news that I wanted to be able to share with you all today, and there's some common threads on that. And so one of the things that Russ and I have found is who our advocates are. And I think one of the things that we love so much about being Flinn Fellows is that you're in this group with people that are from all over the state and with different backgrounds, and you just never know who is going to be your strongest advocate in the group, but you know that you have that talent to be able to reach out. I mean, which is how Russ and I got together, started working years ago together, and didn't know that we would land up being this close on a lot of projects. But we have a lot of our supporters out there. They're Flinn Fellows, but they're also on the government sector, and that's been such a big thing for us to work with as our with the political engagement piece. And I don't know if that's me with the feedback. Are we okay now? I think we're good. And so if Daniel Hernandez is out there, and I give a big shout out to Daniel Hernandez because he's really helped us in the next phase of our grant funding, as well as Evelyn Kasuga. Evelyn, everybody knows Evelyn, but she is always that one person that you can go to and say, here's a project, who do I engage with and how do I get help? And Evelyn is always there. I know, Russ, you had a couple people that you wanted to thank right away too.
Absolutely, yeah. Fellow Coral Evans from Senator Kelly's office. Coral has been just, as always, fantastic to work with, and come into our small community, you know, coming to our meetings, as well as Keith Breckus with Congressman O'Halloran's office. And as we talk a little bit more about, you know, engagement with our elected officials, I can give you strong examples how we've gotten, you know, support from both of them. So, you know, it's just so very important to reach out and be sure that, you know, we're connected. So very happy to have both of them with us here today as well.
Yeah, thank you all to our champions. And we know there's others of you on this call that have helped us, and this CivEx that have helped us. And so we really do appreciate everything that you've done to help our communities get to where they are today. In Cochise County, we were the recipients of a CORI grant, which is the Center on Rural Innovation. And we were one of 4 that were selected nationwide. This grant is super exciting for us. It provides, technical assistance grants to the digital economy and to supporting the underserved communities. And we did this in partnership with Premier Alliance, and their focus, they're located in Bisbee, and their focus is helping the disabled find jobs. And so a couple years ago, John, Charlie, and I started talking about how can we work together to really give people those jobs and to create a workforce. And we all know that having a job, being employed, controlling your destiny, your financial destiny, what that does for a person. And so we talked about how do we put an incubator in there? How do we work together on that? COVID hit, they had to shut down their printing press that they had there. And it's just become a very difficult time. So we partnered with them, and then we partnered with CPLC, Chicanos por la Causa. Again, they do so many amazing things, not only in the state of Arizona, but I think now they're in 3 or 4 other states. And I work very closely with Lydia Ronda. So together on this, we were a finalist for the grant and then got selected. We've just started our process. And the amazing part about this is it's in 2 phases. And the first phase is a $30,000 value, which they're going to create a strategic plan for us. They're going to help us do that gap analysis that we all know has to be done in communities. But again, when you're one person deep in a shop, it's pretty hard for you to be able to do all of that work. So we tell them who our partners are. We tell them sort of where the landmines are, along with who are good strategic partners. And they do the surveying. They have those conversations with those individuals to see how we start to build that pipeline. And for those of you that know me, I always have got all these puzzle pieces together. I just don't know how my puzzle's ever going to look at the end, but I know I need all the pieces. And so for them to be able to come in and really help us shape that is something that we're really, really excited for, and it will do that capacity building for us. If you're interested in more information about that, please get in touch with me if there's a way that you feel you can help us, because what we're going to be doing is building out a digital economy. And what that looks like for each rural area is different. And so be happy to take questions and answer more about that. And now I'm going to put it back to Russ so he can tell us some of the amazing things that he's done in St. John's.
Well, thank you. That's amazing. Yeah, and that building that capacity is, what we're all struggling with. And you made a good point, Mignonne, about the puzzle pieces. We kind of have this, you've got this, you've got your challenges and different things. So we, 2 years ago, decided that we needed more resources in order to figure out what that is. What is that planning? How do we get there? In St. John's, I looked at a $90,000 home, and the annual city tax bill was $56. So think about that. There's just not a lot of resources, and low cost of living, obviously great for that. So we decided to go out to different grant partners and look at different ways to approach that. So our first one was we went to the Arizona Commerce Authority. We applied and received a $45,000 grant to study broadband. We know that for all of our rural communities, if we can't come up with a broadband solution that works, it inhibits every other piece of economic development that we're trying to do. As a result of that, we were able to look at different models nationwide and came up with a public-private partnership. I actually am part of a nonprofit that we're now working with the city, where the city will own the hardware infrastructure, the nonprofit acts as the ISP. And as a result of that partnership, the whole point is access for its citizens. Under the proposal to bring 1,200 homes up onto the broadband, it's $600,000. And that includes the hardware for every single home and monthly access of $49, because we know that's a big piece. A couple others that we did, we also received a $40,000 USDA grant to explore entrepreneurship. So what types of homegrown businesses can we look at in St. John's? We offered classes, we did counseling, and one of the main areas that came up, and it was a little bit of a surprise, but it made sense, was food-based businesses. If you live in St. John's, there's really not a grocery store. The grocery store is half grocery store, half Ace Hardware. It's considered a food desert. So we took that into our planning, that I'll talk about a little bit later. We also received another grant from USDA looking at regional economic development, because we know that St. John's, with a population of 3,500 people, in and of itself can't be self-sufficient. It needs to assets around it. So with that, a couple more we applied. For a USDA RISE grant. Very excited about this. It's a $1.2 million grant to convert the back of City Hall, 3,800 square feet, into a workforce training center for the region. We feel very good about that grant, and we believe we'll have some news to share after October 13th. With that, we're completing an EDA Build Back Better grant for $500,000 right now on infrastructure for the tech park, and then we'll go back to EDA in March next year for looking at build out. So in putting these programs together and then working with our residents, it gave us a better idea of how to build out that blueprint and work with some of the different businesses we have coming into St. John's.
Yeah, the piece about this grant too is the Corey grant, it required that broadband. So Russ, you're so right. That's often so hard. So when we were selected as a finalist, we had this hard conversation about broadband. He's like, listen, and these folks are amazing. Some of you that if you attended the rural conference that Kimber Lanny's group puts on, Matt Dune was one of the key facilitators. And after he left that, he came down and met with me to announce that we were a finalist, but we had some of the conversations beforehand. And one was the broadband. If you're building out a digital economy, you have to have broadband. And he said, tell me about the broadband. And I said, here's the great part. Premier Alliance put in the money to get 5G where they are. They self-funded that final mile piece, which is exactly what we're here at AREDAF, what we've done inside our facilities is we've invested in that infrastructure to do that final mile, but that's costly. So, and then the second part of that Corey grant then sets us up, Russ, like you said, for that EDA funding. But this helps us to build that capacity. And Cecilia put into the chat that that organization from Tennessee that did that in Chattanooga. And you're right, that was one of the things that we got to take a look at as well. So I love these. I love people using that chat and coming forward. So thank you so much for your comments. Please keep them coming and your questions. So yeah, that broadband piece is super hard. So we needed another conversation that Russ and I have. We have so many, but another one of our favorite topics to talk about is healthcare. Healthcare. How do we deliver that to these underserved communities? So what was it, about 2 years ago, we got really serious about our conversation of doing something via telehealth. And I think, you know, COVID showed us that, goodness, we better figure this piece out. So working with, again, partners throughout the state on what can we do to that. We got a grant through the Arizona Department of Health Services that was then administered to the Cochise County Health Department to put in a telehealth center. And so a big portion of the money that we were awarded, it was a $200,000 grant. Most of it is going to go to having broadband put into that building. Again, final mile. And so we're in the process of buying a new building. We were hoping to close on that on Friday and start building out our telehealth center in there. And so it's going to be a 2-part building. We'll have telehealth in there because and it's on the bus line for those of you that are familiar with Sierra Vista and Cochise County. We're right on the bus line because transportation is an issue. And so people can get into the building. They can use that site to have their visits with their doctor. Here's a reality, and Russ sees this in St. John's. Even if you have the broadband capacity at your house, how are you going to pay for it if it's on you're using data and you can't go over your minutes, you can't use, you know, so there's issues that they have there so that they can come in and use this facility. We're really focusing on behavioral health, and it'll work 2 ways. So one, the provider can come use the equipment if they need to see a patient, or the client can come use it to meet with their provider throughout the state. And we're working again with several partners throughout the state on this project to get that rolling. The other part of it is it will be an incubator for behavioral health specialists that are coming in and want to be able to provide that service. So just like any other incubator, and again, my good friend Russ over here has helped us to set up how that looks. So we're very excited to be able to launch that. And again, you know, that was reaching out to our partners and saying, hey, here's an idea. Where can we get that funding? Because we all know for that broadband piece, it's not happening in the format in which we think it should. Right, Russ? So we have to find all these workarounds to be able to get the funding to do what we need to do. And so we're really happy to be able to do that. And Russ, that's similar to what you had to do to get your broadband into St. John's.
Yeah, it really was. We, talked to major carriers, and, we just don't have enough of a population. And even some of the alternatives that we looked at, satellite, others, not a lot of coverage, but it's $200 a month. And for many families in St. John's, that's just not, that's not possible. It's out of reach. So the solution we came up there with, is one we're hopefully starting to implement this fall. It's easy to duplicate, and, if someone's interested in that, be happy to share that. Someone put in a question here about virtual self-employed bookkeepers, looking to train mothers. And I think those types of approaches for rural communities are fantastic. I know there's different foundations you can talk to. Certainly right now, many of the communities have gotten significant ARA funding. I know St. John's received $1.7 million. And so they're trying to figure out how to deploy. So a lot of the communities, they have needs and they're going to use it for that. But a lot of them are looking to use this as an investment. I mentioned the RISE grant that we're working on, and in trying to make sure people are employed and have those, other options. Part of what we did was look at how do we partner outside of the area again, even what some would consider our region. And so we ended up partnering with a program called LabForce. LabForce is a $5 million workforce training program coming out of Maricopa Community College, but it's meant to be statewide. The beauty of this is about 3,000 online courses, and you don't have to get a certificate. You don't have to get a diploma. It's specific base training that you might be looking for and that you might need. We then partnered with the Center for the Future with Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, trying to see, can we create a 4-year pipeline to create those who want to work in cybersecurity. Right now, there's about 500,000 vacant jobs nationwide around cybersecurity. And so we partnered with them. And then we partnered also with Pipeline AZ to look at, okay, how do we connect them to the jobs? So it's a 4-year grant, and we're hoping that, through that, as we have people transition either from the electric coal plants that are closing, and we have more people come in, that we can offer those skill sets. And very important to these communities is youth retention, and trying to figure out, how do we keep our youth, or if they go away to get educated, how do we create an opportunity for them to come back?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Russ. So I know there was a question about the whole, training mothers to do bookkeeping. That is one. Please make sure that you're contacting me. I think I put my contact information into that chat area for you. As we're building out that digital economy, that would be perfect. And we'd love to chat with you on how we bring that in. Paul asked a question about laying the groundwork for getting grants from agencies like EDA. Yeah, huge workaround. So how we were able to do that is we're doing it through the CORI, through that Center on Rural Innovation, because again, when you're trying to do an EDA grant, Russ knows this, it's so much work. And if you're busy trying to do other things in your day job and then trying to just work on an EDA grant, it's super hard. And again, in the rural communities, you just don't have the bandwidth. Like, you could do it, but that's what you will be spending all of your time doing. So for us, we're able to get this CORI grant where we've got somebody who's helping us through the process. I know Russ has his own company, and that's something that they do too, is help you through that process. Because one person to do it alone, even if you're working directly with the agency, there's just so many pieces and parts to do that at some point in capacity, it just becomes impossible. So that's why we're so happy to do this through the Center on Rural Innovation. And like I said, they're working us through the part 1 to do our strategy, build it out, build the capacity, and then put that into the EDA grant, which we're looking at that 1.5 mil. And so, they're building us theirs, which is fantastic, because anyway, along the way, you're having a strategic plan that even if you don't get that funding, you're well set in your community for that whole strategic plan, and to be able to bring in other partners then that can help you with that.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, it's so important to make contact with the funding agency, get to know the individual that covers your area, either regionally or the topic that you want, and understand what their goals are, what they're trying to do. I hear a lot of times from different agencies that, they put out an RFP for proposals, and, they get somewhere no one has ever called the office. I said, hey, can I talk to you about this? Can we, does this fit? Does it not fit? For EDA, we have a state EDA representative. You can get in touch with Cindy yourself and say, hey, I'm thinking about this, and does it fit? One of the interesting things about EDA right now is the amount of funding that's coming down from the federal government to EDA. They've recently said, let us know what your proposals are. We'll look at it for a certain bucket of money. If it doesn't fit there, we, of our own accord, may move it over to another bucket if we think that it really needs to, be funded, and you have a really good case. What we did with USDA was a couple of those smaller grants when we demonstrated to them that they understood what we were trying to build and where we were going. So when we got to the RISE grant, it was a much easier conversation to ask for that 6-digit number, 7 digits actually, to come in. And because they saw we had kind of done the homework. The other thing I think it's extremely important for our community stakeholders to understand is none of this is an overnight process. You're not just going to go out, get a grant in 30 days and boom, it's implemented and it's there. It just takes time. And so some for some communities, I would just suggest, be sure that, your city council, your mayors, your stakeholders of your organization understand where you're wanting to go and make sure it aligns with the community vision. As long as they understand that, and then, they start seeing some progress. I know, as I was saying, we actually were fortunate to have Coral and Keith from the Senator and Congressman's office both come actually at the same time to a city council meeting. So we held a special 1-hour pre-meeting for them to get up and talk about what, the perspectives were from those offices, what they were looking for. And the important thing there, and, we can talk potentially maybe a little bit, Mignonne, if you want, about, the importance of working with your elected officials and making sure they understand where you're going. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, yes, absolutely. But I think one of the most important things that you said, Russ, was the time that it takes to get there. So on this Corey grant, I probably have worked with them for maybe 3 years. Maybe 3 years of just going back and saying, okay, we didn't do it this time. What did I need to do? What do I need to do differently? And a big part of it was that broadband piece, that we just didn't have the capacity for that. But Russ is right, finding a grant that works for your community. And I think one of the things that we see happen so often is that people see a grant and try to go after the grant instead of having a project and then trying to get the project funded. It's a whole different way that works. And the smarter way is to know that you have a project, right, that is going to work and help your community, and then find the funding for that and not the other way around, because it just becomes much more difficult. And then once you're starting to prove yourself and you're having this record of winning something and they see that you're really interested in it, and the smaller grants lead to the bigger and the bigger. And then as you're bringing your elected officials in to help, and so you have your elected officials, right, that just show up for your ribbon cuttings. And then you have your elected officials that are there helping you even when they're not in office. And that's why, for me, the person that has been helping us so much is Daniel Hernandez. Even, on any level, anytime he hears something, he's sending me a text message. He's like, hey, heard about this funding. You need to see about this. What letter can I write? How can I support you? And I need to say that Alma Hernandez is right there too. And they're not in my area. They don't service Cochise County, but yet they're just advocates for rural, and they understand our needs. And so just finding those, even if they're not your electeds, and sometimes those are the strongest advocates, right, is finding someone that isn't in your backyard but can advocate for you, which is why Russ and I make sure to always work together on these things, because we're even telling our legislators, he's telling his, hey, this is an area where they're doing that. And then they build that coalition together to help us on our project. It's super important to always have your champions and then to work those relationships.
Yeah, definitely. And you never know when you might, need some assistance. It's not just always going out for funding. When I first started working with St. John's, there's a little river that runs through St. John's. Yeah. And over the years, the Army Corps of Engineers was responsible for cleaning that little creek out and being sure the silt, the sand, everything, was out of the way, because they had flooding. And when that creek floods, it floods almost all of downtown area. Horrible thing. A couple of years ago, it wasn't being maintained. And so there was build up. And in St. John's, they truly get monsoons. Oh my God, when they get rain, they get rain. So there was a big storm that was rolling in, and the water had already started rising. And the city is like, well, what do we do? We know this is going to be devastating if something isn't done. No response from those that they needed. And so the city took a city backhoe and they cleaned the creek out, right? Rural America makes perfect sense, right? We took care of the problem. Nope, that was not what the state wanted to see happen. They promptly notified the city that they were incorrect, did not get the proper permits, and the fine for this was $300,000. They graciously agreed to give the city, though, 20 years to make the payments on this $300,000. For St. John's, that was all their sidewalk money, their road money for years. It just would have been devastating. So at that time, contacted another Flinn-Brown Fellow, Chip Davis, who was in Congressman O'Halloran's office, and said, Chip, let me tell you a story. Oh my God, is there anything we can do? And under his leadership and Congressman O'Halloran, they got in touch with the state, brought everyone together, had an honest dialogue about what happened, and that $300,000 fine became zero. The city got a small slap on the wrist. Don't do that again. But it was a situation where, those elected officials were able to step in with contacts that, the small municipality didn't have. So there's lots of help they can give. I know under Coral's leadership and Senator Kelly's office, they were gracious to put in a $600,000 appropriation for broadband to supplement what the city's trying to do to help get additional lines out to the industrial property. And so staying in touch with them, I cannot emphasize the importance of just letting them know what's happening, inviting them to some events when you don't need anything. Don't wait until you need something to knock on the door. It's like going to the bank for a loan and, you ask them, what's the name of your banker? It's the drive-through. Well, no, that's not the way relationships work.
It's so true.
But I know when I came to St. John's, I asked a couple of elected officials, who are your state representatives? We're not sure. We think it's so and so. So it's just important, as we all know, to build those relationships, and it's a two-way street. So when you do get assistance and you've got something to celebrate, be sure to include those elected officials as well.
Yeah. Hey, Russ. Francis has this excellent question here, and she says, "Can you say more about projects designed to retain youth in rural communities or bring them back after they've left? Any success on the project or too new to know results?" Those are always so tough, right? Like, it's so tough. I know Cecilia that's on this call too, that is her thing that she's always trying to figure out to do. But I know, Russ, you've just started a project. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, we have a project that was actually already there, but we're working with and supporting. In St. John's, at one point, they have, juvenile detention center. Unfortunately, those are sometimes necessary in their communities. Kids get bored. What do we do? There's nothing to do. And they were spending about $250,000 a year to incarcerate on average 1.75 youth per day. Think about that, in a small community like this. So the juvenile judge one day said, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. What can we do? So the community came together and they decided to transform the juvenile center into a youth center for the high school students. So they came in, they did the work. There's a small kitchen, there's a music room, there's an art room, there's computers, there's basketball, there's bocce, there's video games. And the way that it works is when a student gets to 9th grade, they get access as long as they've done their homework, and there's actually an electronic check-in system back to the high school that any teacher can flag the student and say, oh, you didn't turn in your homework, Johnny. So Johnny has a special place to go get his homework. But then you can come here, you can play, you can be with your friends. And when that student hits 9th grade, the interesting thing that they do is they bring all of their younger siblings with them and say, when you get to high school, here's a way that you can get involved. And they do different activities within the communities. And they have reduced the operating costs of that down to about $250,000 a year. They've also created a safe place within that for students who perhaps the families, there's an issue. They need a safe place overnight instead of being sent to Sholo and locked up. And, that type of community involvement, I think, is very important. They also, the video that I showed you, I have another one we may or may not get to, where the students are going out, they're doing, they're doing videos, they're doing different things within the community, and what we're hoping for is through the center that we're creating on the tech park, is that we will have, youth focused training in the incubators that I've set up. We used to do our youth entrepreneurship summer camp. So it's a week-long camp where students come in on Monday. It's sort of like a startup weekend, and they share ideas for a business. And, I've got to convince Mignonne to get on my team, or she's trying to get me on her team. And then through the week, we bring out different mentors. So by Friday, they formulated a business idea, shot a video, PowerPoint presentation, radio spot, and they're ready to stand up and talk about their ideas. The other piece that we're really focusing on through LabForce is internships. And there's an entire internship management model to try and get our youth involved in our companies to understand how they work, and that's an option for remaining.
Yeah, thanks, Russ. I know Cecilia typed in there that, fast internet is part of is part of the challenge sometimes. But you're right, having those programs. We've seen that in a lot of the communities, you know, there was for a while, everybody wanted to have a youth council, right? That's like a big thing. What I found in my experience, and hopefully other people's experience is different, is they have those and then they don't really listen to them, or they go, oh, okay, yeah, those kids. And they don't value that, and they don't respect what they bring to the table, and then they don't groom what they have, the talent that they have right before them. We work with many different organizations, and we allow, if they have a youth component to them, we allow them to have space inside our incubator. It's just a little cubicle, but we found that and the one I'm just gonna say, it was from NAACP. They had a youth division. They started an NAACP youth program. And I spoke to them and I said, hey, why don't we have them come in and have an office where they got to come in and do their books. They get a key card. And then just the difference that we saw in those individuals that had positions inside that youth program of coming into a day office, of having a cubicle space, of being in an office setting, made a huge difference in their lives. But I think a lot of that in those youth programs, and people that work with youth are much more experienced on that than I am. But I can tell you a big part for me is just that respect and giving them the room to grow and to honor what they bring to the table.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, Mignonne, and it's about engagement. I've been to 2 city council members where the youth actually brought petitions to the city because there was issues they were concerned with. One of them was the community pool got closed due to COVID. So the students had 200 student signatures that we want the pool open. And so it was a great dialogue. The mayor and city council, you know, they started dialogue with the students there and explained this is a safety issue. This is what we're doing, but these are the methods and things. And so I think any of that involvement, the youth program that Mignonne's talking about, where they feel a part of that community, you know, and they see the opportunities are just huge on retention. And a lot of that, at least in St. John's, is going to revolve around getting them involved in those local businesses. So they see, you know, not everyone is meant to immediately graduate high school and go to college,
Yeah.
you know, or even trade school. You know, some are just not ready yet. So although we all want them all to do that, they need to do it when they're ready, not
Exactly. Again, meeting people where they are, right? Not where you want them to be. It's huge. Paul has another question. He says, Russ, you've done some amazing work in St. John's. He's assuming that you don't work pro bono, which we know is true. You don't, although it's near pro bono. He asked, do the communities need to come up with funding for consultants, or can that come from grants? It can come from both. So I say, if you're from a community, you have an idea, you need help, call me or Russ. We'll find somebody that can come in and help your community. You'll find your champions. So with us and the work that we were doing with Premier Alliance and that I do here in Cochise County, a lot of it is they didn't pay for it. They don't have the funds to do that. So we really look to see, and Russ does the same thing, and I'll let him speak more on that, of how do we work together to get you ready for some funding? How do we find, and if what we're doing needs some funding, let's figure that step out. But I never like to see something die because of lack of funding. Let's just figure out another workaround. Let's figure out another resource. And Russ, I'm going to let you answer that because you do a lot pro bono. He does a lot of work for me pro bono. Not that I'm advertising his pro bono side, because I know he also needs to get paid, but you know, you don't know what the answer is going to be until you ask. And I can give you a super example. We did a complete revamp of our website and our marketing. And I knew we needed it done. And I went to somebody who I know is fantastic in the area and said, oh gosh, I would really love you to do my stuff, but I can't afford you. And she goes, how do you know you can't afford me? You haven't even asked. And so then that taught me the lesson. And sure enough, she came up with a plan that fit our budget to do that. But Russ, I'll let you take it away.
Sure. Well, I mean, you know, communities have to be able to make some sort of minimal investment. I think that's expected. I can say for us, when we're working, we're very cognizant of community budgets, of costs and things. And fortunately, I'm at a point in my career where I can kind of choose, what makes sense. And for me, it's if a project has multi-generational impact, then it's worth time. And so, I was recently down with Mignonne's board, and we spent several hours talking about incubators, how they run, what happens. And, I got a very nice room overnight and a very nice dinner, and that was enough. But there are other groups, that will help with that. We specifically do not go in to write grants where we are funded, just as a group, just because that's not how I like to see those things come along. But I think when there's the common interest, there's different community members that can get involved. I know SRP, APS, for example, have been, especially in some of the rural communities, great places to go to that they realize a little bit of seed money in a community can make a huge difference for them.
Yeah, again, if you have a project in mind, that's the easiest thing. I know sometimes you don't really know what it is, and I can tell you for us with our grants, I have ideas. I have lots of ideas. And so usually I just stick them out. Okay, here's some things that can work. And the more conversations you have with someone, the more you start to talk through that. Russ and I, we just know, we work together a lot, as you all know, but we just know that at some point these projects are going to come together and be one. So we're really hoping that, for example, the telehealth one, that model that we've created here, that we can use that in other rural communities, because if they've got broadband, they can dial in to the telehealth center here and be able to use that. So again, it's really finding out what the needs are in that community and will work. And I understand sometimes you don't know. You're just like, here's where we are, here's some of the pieces. But you do have to have skin in the game too, or they just walk away from things. I'm one that believes it's nothing for free because you don't show up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And fellow David Martinez is with a great foundation, Vitalist Health, and he just put in a couple links there for you to look at. They have a really good, several different programs. And, one of the things I really appreciate about Vitalist is if you have an idea, they'll actually let you schedule 20 minutes just to kind of, do an early pitch. Again, like I said, does it align with where they are, and where they're going? So Vitalist has been a great, a great support of our rural communities. There is a question here in the chat, examples of where a rural agency and a tribes have worked together in any grant initiatives or projects. I have one, but Mignonne, do you have one, or you want me to?
No, I'll let you take it away.
Okay. When I was running NASET in Flagstaff, the business incubator, there was interest in from the tribes to, set up some kind of incubation program themselves, that would fit their culture and what they needed. So we worked with USDA, who provided a $50,000 grant. I believe this was in 2012. And we worked with the Navajo, White Mountain Apache, and we created the Native American Incubation Network. And the goal of the Native American Incubation Network is to help them identify not only potential opportunities for economic growth, companies, but networking, and also understanding that, this is how companies are formed and how they work on a tribe. And my first presentation, I stood up, I think I was the only Caucasian in the room, and I was very blunt. I said, this is not the white guy here to tell you how to run a business on the tribe lands, because I don't know. What I can share with you are some business fundamentals and business basics and some resources, right, that you can get to. So that program, we had everything from cattle farmers. We had a young gentleman who was an incredible computer repair tech, and he had more business than he knew what to do with, but he would never hire other employees. He didn't want that. That wasn't his vision. We ended up, after 2 years, handing that off to a Native American group to run. And I'm excited to say they've changed the name. It's called Change Labs, but it is still there and it is still running. So I think it was a great opportunity for the city of Flagstaff to work with USDA, to work with the tribe, to work together on something that, the tribe could own and run themselves.
Now, and if you're looking for a resource for that, I would try the National Center for American Indians Enterprise. My friend Chad Merchant is on their board there. I think he's a CEO or something. Anyway, if you need that contact information, I'd be happy to get that for you. But there are some amazing resources. I also want to give a shout out for AAED, Arizona Association for Economic Development. they often have opportunities in that area as well. So there are some great places to get some of those resources. Frances had a follow-on question to the youth piece. And she said, do we think that the digital economy is creating more opportunity to keep people, entrepreneurs, and otherwise in rural communities? I would say absolutely. That's a component of this, Frances, is doing that, is that component to help them build their own businesses and figure out what works for them. And we want to give them the right tools in it, right? So that how we envision this is, then there's a training program as well. We've been using co-starters with great success. Really like their model. There are a lot of those sort of business boot camps. And I'm very, very picky about which ones work and components of it. The one that we've been working that worked super well in our community was co-starters. So if you wanted more information on that, happy to give you more information on that as well.
Yeah, I
there's
think
a lot of resources. We just have to find the ones that work best for us, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the digital economy does transform everything. So as we work to get broadband into these communities, how do we use that? In St. John's, they started a really interesting program called the Come Home program. And City Council started this, and it was for people who grew up in St. John's, moved away, and they wanted them to come back. Come back home. That was their message. I believe to date they have 6 families that have relocated back to St. John's. Certainly, we still have housing issues, but we're starting to address that. We have several other families that want to come back to St. John's, but they can't because they have online businesses and they have to have that access in order to do that. So I think as we see broadband become more prevalent and these communities figure out what is their model, for broadband, it's a public-private partnership, is a large carrier, whatever that is, that you're going to see that. And I think especially with our youth, because this has always been around, right, to them. So, it's a natural progression. That's part of what we're hoping with working with LabForce, is that we'll be able to take some of those different training and modules and things and help those students who want to do digital businesses do that and stay in the region of St. John's.
Thanks. Well, we have a few more minutes. Do you have other questions, other things you'd like to know, or I know I was going to say something, but I guess we can't really take you off of mute to tell your stories. That does not work here. But if there's any other questions that you have for us, we're here. Or Russ, do you want to try and start that last video up? That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Let me show just a real quick. So I want to give you a youth perspective of St. John's, which I think is pretty cool. So I'm going to jump through to different points because I don't want to play the whole thing. But this is a youth in St. John's, and you can see just in their faces, their body language, their talk, why they love their small rural community.
That we have here, it is way different than living in a big city, which we'll talk about in a video coming soon. But for now, we're just going to take you around and show you what we have. You guys excited to show your hometown?
Time to heal it, still you fight with what you're told, and hold on to your scars, the wounds, the past of old. And I said, what would you do if you could lose?
Set up very similar to the movie Cars and Radiator Springs, to where there's just one main road and all the businesses are along that road. The only difference between us and Cars is we don't even have a stoplight. They at least have a stoplight in Cars, but
there are quite a few churches in town. There's 2 Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a Catholic church, a Christian church, and several others.
Here's our local theater. theater, and it's actually only open 3 days.
Sorry about that. Okay.
3 days a week for one showing. So, but the really cool thing that I thought was really cool, at least for a big family, is every Monday night they have a family showing, and for $25 your entire family can get in. So I think they made that rule before us in the crazy middle of town. I didn't know how many kids we have. Most families aren't as big as ours, but it's a really cute theater. So here's the theater.
So this is our local grocery store. It's also mixed with an Ace hardware store though,
Which is kind of different.
This is our drug store, so you can get like prescriptions if you get sick. And this is auto parts. So it's like for cars or like tools you need to like fix something. I guess I don't know. I've never really done it. I haven't been in there.
It's a car shop.
I haven't been in there. And we have our local sandwich shop, Subway or Subway.
Oh, look, there's Dad. Oh, what are you doing there? Did you give me a cookie? Aww.
So that gives you a little bit of an idea of, from the students' perspectives. And I know they're going to be sharing the links to those if you would like to see any of those.
That's great. That's great. I love it. I think we should do a competition for that, right? And all the small communities, have them run that. And actually, Russ, I know somebody who could help them do that. And we could just figure out a price. So if you all want in on this, this is another project that Russ and I are right now going to start working on. If you have a community, a small community, or you know of a small community, get their youth in there, and we can help them put the video clip together, and we can figure out some sort of a prize that they could win, and we could feature that on some platform. But more on that, because I just had that idea as we're chatting, and we'll work on that. I think one of the things that we did want to hit on is that housing. Yep. And what housing is doing to our small communities right now with this housing bubble. While you're trying to sell your house, isn't that great? You can sell it, but what is happening to the people that cannot afford their homes anymore, and the affordable housing piece that comes in? And I'm president of our homeless shelter, and I know that the affordable housing piece is becoming more and more of an issue here in Cochise County. And I'm sure we can see that across the state. So Russ, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to the discussion on affordable housing, or if anybody wants to put something in the chat about that, we'd be happy to discuss it.
Yeah, I would say in St. John's, it's huge. You know, there has been no new housing starts for years. I think a couple of mobile home permits, which was great because it's some. And what they found as they were trying to do the come back program is that, you know, families were coming in and spouses were going, I'm not living in that, if there's even anything available. And unfortunately, because there was a lack of codes over the years, a lot of the properties, you know, inhabiting them is even questionable. Fortunately for St. John's was blessed. You may have remembered from our last discussion that a developer was again watching what was going on in St. John's, saw the city trying to pick itself up. And so the city received a call one day from this developer, and he said, housing is a real issue for you. You know, and I get it. He goes, I want to help with that. I'm not interested in building houses because, you know, I'm just not interested in that. But I have 35 residential lots, and I want to give them to you as a gift to the city. So I'm excited to report out to the group that as of now, 26 of those lots have been sold, 12 of those to developers who are commencing new housing in St. John's. And there's an emphasis on the affordability with that, right? So that they can actually afford to get in. And so working with USDA, if you're not familiar, there are several home loan programs that can do up to 103%. They can be 39 years, but there's also a second program that they have for rural communities where a homeowner who qualifies, I believe you have to be 62 or older, can get a $7,500 grant to do improvements to their home, or a 20-year, $20,000 loan at 1% interest. And so we're hoping that with the new housing, we'll have families transition into the new housing, open up the market, use some of this other money to come in and do improvements and make them more inhabitable and hopefully affordable. And certainly we all know with the cost of materials right now for all communities, it's a struggle, but especially in our smaller rural communities where, we're not building a division of homes at a time.
Yeah, that really is. I know we're getting more requests, just to help with vouchers for payments, and a lot of our CGO down here in our area, or your MAGs and PAGs, they're being asked to help in their housing department to give vouchers. So yeah, that kind of cringe about where that'll all land in the next 6 months. We've got 2 minutes left. I just want to thank everybody for being on the call and for the opportunity to talk about some of the amazing work that we get to do every day that we call our jobs. Russ?
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. You have our contact information. I think you can see Mignonne and I are very passionate about rural communities. They're so special, and our urban centers are fantastic, but there's just there's the challenges are a little different, but there's also a lot of really positive, great things happen in those communities as they come together and work as regions to make improvements.
And a big thank you always to the Flinn Foundation for giving us this platform. We're always happy to come back. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.